We have a wonderful treat today. I know that our spiritual practices and our spiritual unfolding and growth is a serious matter. But we have our two resident comics here today to show us that there is a lighter side to all of this. I challenge each one of you to keep from smiling at least one point in their presentation and what they're sharing with us today. And that's a good thing, because humor and laughter is very healing. So I would love to bring up now our Reverend Cathie Sinfield, who we love. We feel so comfortable in her presence. She makes each one of us feel better for being around her. So let's hear her brilliant sharing.
And I resolved not to be funny this morning. Thanks, Monica. So I, going first, get the job of probably explaining, well, I was going to explain the topic, but I think that Darlene did such a fabulous job. Mark leaned over to me and said, "She just did our whole talk." And we thought we were being clever. We didn't discover till recently. We kept wondering who the guest speaker was going to be today. Imagine our surprise when we discovered it was us. And I love the words in that song, "I can't wait to see what's going to happen next." I thought, oh yeah, that's true. So we chose the topic, promises, because it was so big that we felt we had a lot of wiggle room inside. And not only did it give us way too much wiggle room, but it thoroughly confused Jennifer, who called me and said, "What on earth are you talking about?" Well, I don't know yet, but the phone call helped me decide. And right now, I just want to thank Jennifer. She's not doing two jobs, she's doing three. You know, there's Andy, she's taking the place off, she's our brilliant soloist, and she's covering for Reverend Mary. So kudos to you, woman, you're amazing. And I think everybody's on a bus somewhere, because Andy's away and Bruce is away, so John is somewhere, and we'll thank him for taking place. And of course, Oliver's our faithful percussionist. So, you know, sometimes I say, well, I don't make promises, you know, fairly proudly, thinking, well, that way I can't break them. And I also say I don't make resolutions, thinking, well, you know, I can't break them. And then I realized in thinking about this talk that it's just not true. And there are so many other words for promises. I make a pact, I make a decision. Like Darlene talked about that morning thing of exercise. Oh my God. And I know when I'm preparing talks, sometimes I cringe and think, well, I won't say that because that's pointing the finger at me too much. But I have to be courageous and impeccable in my word by admitting that often the privilege of doing a talk reminds me of certain things. So the general theme for this month throughout the churches in religious science and Centers for Spiritual Living is kindness and compassion. And when we think about the first agreement of Don Miguel Ruiz, it is be impeccable in your word. And we can't do that and treat each other if we're not impeccable with ourselves. And one of the things we really work on in class is becoming aware of what we're saying to ourselves all the time. There's a quote about this, and it says, "We have the need to be accepted and to be loved by others, and we can't accept and love ourselves, so we can't really accept and love other people. The more self-love we have, the less we will experience self-abuse. It comes from self-rejection, and self-rejection comes from having an image of what it means to be perfect and never measuring up to that ideal. Our image of perfection is the reason we reject ourselves. It's the reason we don't accept ourselves the way we are and why we don't accept others the way they are." So I wonder if we do honour our commitments and our promises. Now, some of you, if you've ever asked me to do something for you during the week, you know I'm going to ask you to write it on a piece of paper with your name and your phone number, because it's not that I'm willingly forgetting my promise, but I then put it in the office, which comes as a surprise to a lot of people the first time they ask me. But at the end of the day, I will remember my promise. And I was reminded of this by the story of a chap that was late for an important meeting. And he's driving around the parking lot, desperately looking for a space. And he goes, "Oh God, I'm already late. I will start going to church every week if you just help me find a parking spot." Well, the words are barely out of his mouth, and he looks up and there's a parking spot. And he says, "Never mind, I found one." How often do we forget the promises we've made, or we think that doesn't count, that wasn't part of it? There's a wonderful sort of poem, it's Promise Yourself by Christian Larson, who's a great new thought teacher. And I've just taken a couple of lines out of it. And one of them is, to be so strong that nothing can disturb your peace of mind. We already know that. We hear about it all the week. We promise ourselves, yes, we'll do that. But sometimes when we hear something that's devastating, that pulls up all those fears out of us, that brings us to our knees sometimes when we start making promises. You know, I realize I didn't do that, but, you know, if we can get through this, you know, and then when everything's all right, we sort of forget it again. I know I've done it, and I've done it recently, and my word, I'm not being impeccable in my word when I do that. To make all your friends feel there's something in them. I love that song, "I'm here to remind you of your magnificence," and help you awake to all the wonder that you are. And I'm gradually learning to appreciate when people do it to me. But it was hard at first. It was easy to give out, but harder to receive. To give so much time to the improvement of yourself that you have no time to criticize others. And he goes on to think well of yourself and to proclaim this fact to the world, not in loud words, but great deeds. When you're impeccable in your word, you take responsibility for your actions, but you don't judge or blame yourself. These words are very, very powerful. When we sing about be careful of your thoughts, be careful of your words, it's not just trite, and it's not the fact that we can turn off our belief that, you know, God can't possibly hear all my words. We hear all our words. And one of the things we do in class is to keep track of some of the things we say to ourselves and realize what we're saying to ourselves. That's the biggest thing about being impeccable in your word. Because if you're not, you can't be impeccable with other people. And so it's one of the greatest lessons, and it's said that this is the simplest but hardest agreement that Don Miguel wrote about. Because when you start tracking your thoughts, you will realize that, you know, we load up our private thoughts with guilt and shame and regret and all that good stuff. I know with me, I can't use the real words here, but I'm driving and I'll say, "Oh, you silly moo," or "you twit," and have to remind myself that I'm not, well, I haven't up to this week reminded myself I'm not being impeccable. It just comes out, doesn't it? So it's our words can totally erode our lives and ruin our relationships. And I read something where someone wrote, "You know me, I love to sleeping, and I'm not good at waking up in the morning, and I'm not very good at relaxing." And it suddenly occurred to them that they were creating their reality with those words and phrases, and because they kept saying it, they came to really believe it. And we all do that to some degree. So that's where, especially in class, it's marvelous to do that exercise. And so look at your words. And the second agreement is don't take anything personally. Oh boy. I suddenly realized that I shouldn't have chosen this one, because those of you that are near and dear to me know that I do that a lot. And blends in with the first agreement. If you can't get the first agreement right, you're absolutely not going to get the second one right. Now, there's a great example of when you meet somebody, if they've had a great day, they got up early, they did their exercises, they got a raise, they had a wonderful drive, and everything's fantastic. The way they treat you is going to be wonderful. But if you meet the same person and they got up late, they got fired, they were in a car accident and everything went wrong for them, if the way they treat you is what dictates how you're going to look at your day, you're in deep doo-doo. Well, you know what I mean. So I have to laugh. I have to share a little bit of this morning. I was out in the foyer, and I'm sure he's not here now, but there was a gentleman came here who hasn't been here in some 20 years, peeked in for first service, and as most of you know, it's quite sparsely attended. And the words he spoke to me about what we've done to this place really shook me up. And I started to laugh because I thought, not only am I not responsible for what you just saw, but I can't take you personally. And I know that one of our dear friends tried to calm him down out in the parking lot, but I just thought, what a great example. If we don't have a splinter of belief in what someone says to us, it doesn't hurt us. But if we do, it's going to hurt us. I have to share one story, since I've got a reputation. This chap was driving along very, very slowly, and he came to an intersection and the light turned yellow, and so he decided that he would stop, much to the chagrin of the woman behind him. Now, if you're a woman, you know that you usually don't have your purse closed. You stop quickly, and once again, unholy words will probably pop out. And I know this wasn't in the South Bay, because she really wanted to run through that light as fast as she could, and she had to stop. So she was furious, and she's honking a horn, and she's screaming blue murder, and she missed a chance to get through the intersection, and she's ranting, and somebody taps on her window, and it's a police officer. And he arrests her. And he takes her off to the jail, and she gets fingerprinted, she gets photographed, she gets put in a cell for a while they sort this out. And eventually she's taken out of the cell, and the officer hands her stuff back. And he says, "I'm so sorry. You see, I pulled up behind you at that intersection. You were blowing your horn, flipping the guy off in front of you, cussing a blue streak at him. And I noticed that what would Jesus bumper sticker? What would Jesus do bumper sticker? And then I saw another bumper sticker and said, 'Follow me to Sunday school.' And then there was the chrome-plated fish emblem. So I just thought you stole the car." We have to be true to our words because it's going to come out at some point anyway. So with those thoughts in mind, and I just know from previous experience, you're just going to remember my story and not the essence of what is said. But I'm so delighted to invite Marc up. That's Marc with a C. And I love this man. And he's such a support and such an inspiration to me. And he's going to share his thoughts about our topic today. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I get the opportunity to follow that, huh? Wasn't that fantastic? And surely she did not disappoint when it comes to being one of the two comics. Now, I didn't realize that the other comic was Darlene. Yeah? Didn't she do a marvelous job? I think it is so important that keeping those promises, especially the ones you make to yourself, as Reverend Cathie pointed out, make those words impeccable and don't take things personally. Because when you do those things, then you are and have the ability to show kindness and compassion to your fellow man. And quite frankly, that's what it's all about. I'd like to continue that discussion, if I may, going to the other two agreements of Don Miguel Ruiz. Agreement number 3, don't make assumptions. And agreement number 4, always do your best. So I thought about, okay, don't make assumptions. So I'm going to assume that you're going to assume that I'm going to do my best. Let's see what our assumptions get us to be. Now, when I do my best, I get feedback from you members. And some of you out there like it when I quote scriptures. And I think you like that because you know I'm not a biblical scholar. And some of you out there like me to refer to the Greeks, probably because of your Greek heritage. So what I'm going to do is quote from scriptures, Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 13. But I said to myself, well, what is Ecclesiastes? I didn't know what that was. So, I went to the font of knowledge, Google. And Google, or maybe it was Wikipedia, I take that back, told me that it was a Greek translation of a Hebrew word meaning teacher or preacher. And some people believe that Ecclesiastes was written by King Solomon, the wise one. So let's see what wisdom we have in store from Ecclesiastes. And I quote, "Fools base their thoughts upon foolish assumptions, and therefore their conclusions will be wickedly manifest." Then it goes on, they chatter. So I sit back and I go, well, that's a lot of wisdom if you're having those foolish assumptions and you're now having wicked conclusions. But some of you out there say, hey, that's Old Testament, that's a long time ago. And I go, well, let's take a look at a modern courtroom. I'm somewhat familiar with that. And you often hear, or at least I hear, in Perry Mason and LA Law and other places where I learned my law, you often hear, that objection, it calls for speculation, all right? We've heard that one. Or I object because it's assuming facts, not in evidence. Well, now, as we all know, a trial is a search for truth. And attorneys, oh, wait a minute, can I use attorneys and truth in the same sentence? That's called an oxymoron. Shook me up a little bit there. But that is the evidence code. So that is saying, hey, we think there are problems. King Solomon in Ecclesiastes, and now the evidence code says, hey, there's problems here with making assumptions. And Don Miguel says the same thing. He says, don't make it. So what's the problem with making assumptions? Well, because it's all coming from our perceptions of what we see and what we hear the other person doing. Now, science of mind deals in thought. And that's what I love about science of mind. But here, our thought typically is, okay, I've made an assumption, but now my mind is going to support that assumption. It's going to come up with this story and that story because I want to be right, because I'm protecting myself. I want to be safe. Well, guess what? None of that deals with compassion or kindness for the other person because we're protecting ourselves. And because we view the world through our perceptions, we're adhering and adding to those speculations, those assumptions. So let's give an example, and I know that Darlene gave some great examples, and I'll deviate, because the example that she brought up was taking out the trash. Very familiar with that one. The wife says, "Would you please take out the trash?" Husband says, "Of course I will." She makes the assumption that he's going to do it now. He's making the assumption that, well, whenever I get to it, it's okay by her, because she didn't articulate a specific, I need it done now, I need it done in 5 minutes, I need it done by the end of the day. And had he heard that, he could have then verified, yes, I will, no, I won't. So, very powerful example by Darlene. Now, the example that I'm going to do is from Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he points out a time when he was on a bus, subway in New York, Sunday morning. It was relatively quiet. There's people on there, and they're reading their Sunday newspaper, and they're relaxing, and suddenly a man sits down next to him and has 2 small kids. And these kids are rambunctious. They're going crazy. They're running up and down. They're making a lot of noise. This guy's getting really irritated. The guy's not doing anything about his kids. They're bumping into papers. He knows that people are getting irritated, and this guy sitting next to him is doing absolutely nothing. So he finally gets so irritated. He says, "Sir, your children are making a nuisance. You're not doing anything about it. Can you please take care of the situation?" And he's getting a little uptight. And the guy's head is down. He goes, "Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. We just came from the hospital, and we found out that my wife died a couple of hours ago, and I don't know how to handle it, and I don't think the children do either, but I'm sorry." Whoa. Now, from the assumption that the person made in the first place to when he got the information. So what is Don Miguel Ruiz saying here? How can we take care of these type of situations? It's a communication situation. It's one where we're afraid to ask questions to clarify, right? Well, I didn't quite understand what you mean. Dear, you said you wanted me to take the trash out. Now, when was that? Yesterday. Oh, okay, I'll get to it. So we have the opportunity to clarify, and then by doing that clarification, we are treating that communication and the other person with kindness and compassion. Okay? Now, in Science of Mind, that's what it's all about. That's what the global topic is, treating people with compassion and kindness. And if we have an awareness and understanding of our assumptions and that interplay, we can help come from a point of view of compassion and kindness. Now, for the 4th agreement, it's always do your best. Well, in Science of Mind, we like to say when you treat, you move your feet. I mean, we've all heard that. I think it really is a Quaker statement, but, Holmes probably steals everything, so that's okay. So when we treat, we move our feet, and that's a real, to me, an action thing, a do thing. We have to do something, because if we're keeping our word impeccable, if we are not taking things personally, if we're not making assumptions, right, then we're doing our best. Now, some people go, well, wait a minute, is this instantaneous? No. Circumstances change as to what your best is or your best isn't. There was a little mantra I learned in the 4th grade, and somehow I've remembered it. Good, better, best. Don't stop to rest till your good is your better and your better is your best. And I think Science of Mind, and I think doing your best is a process towards that goal. To just automatically flip a switch and say, yeah, I'm not going to make any assumptions anymore. I'm going to always do my best right here, right now. Well, maybe those are some of those promises that we don't keep. But if we look at the progression and we look at becoming aware and knowing and using it Step by step, we break the habit of making assumptions and not doing our best. So we keep practicing, and we get better, and we get better. Because in science of mind, we like to look at things that we want to pray, and when we pray for doing things with divine right action and from our highest point of view. Because we want to be able to demonstrate, and hopefully by using these techniques, we demonstrate more kindness and more compassion. So, the question is when? Well, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, you cannot do a kindness too soon because you may never know when your too soon is too late. So when? ASAP, as soon as possible. A little ambiguous there on the word possible. What about PDQ? Pretty darn quick. So if that happens, we all know it's QED. And that's Latin for quod errata demonstratum, which you see in math a lot. It means thus it is demonstrated, and so it is.